was under the Saddam Hussein regime a serial violator of all those four. I'll just recap. Didn't just invade Kuwait, as is often wrongly described, annexed and absorbed the state of Kuwait, a full member state of the United Nations, full member state of the Arab League, of the Islamic Conference and of the Non-Aligned Movement, into the territory of Iraq, made it the 19th province, attempted to do the same to the Khuzestan provinces of Iran. The loss in point of lives in the first case, the Iranian case, is reckoned to be ultimately perhaps about 1.5 million casualties on young men on both sides. Even gave a name to the campaign, the Anfal campaign, as it was called, to erase the population of northern Iraq, the Kurdish population, to our shame, with American weaponry, which had also been supplied to them for the war against Iran. Gave repeated encouragement, help, solace, and hospitality to a very large number of international wanted terrorist groups, from Abu Nidal, who used to be the most wanted man in the world, to Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, a very important lieutenant of Osama bin Laden's, who moved directly from Afghanistan to Iraq at a time when countries like Saudi Arabia and Pakistan were expelling such people from their soil. Iraq was inviting them into the country. I don't need to recall to you that Iraq is under Saddam Hussein, is the only country to not just secretly developed and tried to extend its development of chemical and biological weapons, but to have used them on Iranians and on Kurds, in other words, within its own borders as well as outside. In other words, if we come to the question of legitimacy, it seems to me that the repeated flouting by the Iraqi regime of every single international instrument and resolution ever passed or adopted, or principle enshrined by the United Nations, is a far greater defiance of international law and of the UN in theory and in practice than any attempt made by either the British or American governments to remove the regime. And it's of interest, in fact, to find that in the halls of the United Nations today, nothing really is talked about that doesn't come under the heading of reform. It seems to have been finally understood, and I hope it's clearly understood in this hall, that the record of the United Nations on Rwanda, where action was positively prevented from being taken to forestall the genocide, to Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo, where another ethnocide was in process and had to be stopped by NATO because of the permanent presence of the veto of powers like Russia, China, and France, some of them also repeating this process in the case of Iraq, a regime with which they had very intimate military and economic relations, and we know that several important French and Russian politicians were bought during the course of the Oil for Food program, in which the UN program designed for the alleviation of the suffering of the Iraqi people was turned into something between a bordello and a bourse. And 18 palaces were built, one in every province of Iraq, on the proceeds. The Oil for Palaces program was, as we know it, while the people were made to eat garbage and drink ditch water. This is what came of the reliance upon the authority of the United Nations. It seems to me to act in the spirit and the letter of that organization is to say, no, it is enough. We must move Iraq into the post-Saddam era. Now, I converge my two hemispheres, if you like, for their sake and for ours. We have the right to call for an end to a regime of invasion, of genocide, of the sponsorship of terror, and of the flouting of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. We have the right to say that regime is a danger to ourselves, and we have a duty to the people of Iraq. As it happens, I was there, I saw it with my own eyes, I won't hear anyone tell me it did not occur. The invading forces were greeted all the length and breadth of the country for days on end with demonstrations of unfakeable joy. I'll never forget seeing it. I will never let anyone tell me I didn't see it either. But that's, if you like, only an extra. They could all have stayed home and just said, well, we'll await developments. Legally and morally, it comes to the same thing. Legally and morally, I don't think it does come to the same thing, that 3 years ago, Saddam Hussein, a leading member of the Fascist International, a man whose party ideology was based in part on National Socialism and in part on emulation of Stalinism, who had concentrated the entire resources of the country into his own hands and those of his family. Everything in the country, including its people, was privately held by him. That this man is gone and in jail where he deserves to be, and on trial where he should have been a long time ago. And instead we have elected, as the